The Illinois FOID card's been around since the 60s, and it requires that anybody who wants to buy or own ammo or guns, they have to get a state-issued identification from Illinois State Police. And we've seen some of the problems with that when it comes to individuals wanting to exercise their Second Amendment rights in the state of Illinois. There could be some snags, including what we saw in late 2019 and throughout the early parts of the COVID-19 pandemic and the civil unrest in the summer of 2020. People applying for FOID cards, waiting well beyond the statutory guidelines laid out in state law to get their privileges issued by the state. And we saw this with months and months and months of delays, even some stories of people waiting more than a year to get their, not just FOID card, people also are applying for their FOID renewals, which is required. So that sparked a lot of conversation about the FOID card system in the state of Illinois and individuals' access to the Second Amendment, which is a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, Illinois is one of about 3 states in the union that requires some kind of state-issued permit in order to buy or own weapons or ammunition. And we've seen challenges across the board in both federal court and state court. Some of those challenges still pending. It's just part of the overall gun scheme that Illinois has in place, including the Gun Dealer Licensing Act that was recently passed and implemented, which led to a lot of gun dealers just not wanting to jump through extra hoops through the state that they have to jump through on top of the federal government. So we did see hundreds of licensed gun dealers not register with the state, so they're not going to be selling guns in the state of Illinois, across the state. But with the FOID card, there's been some efforts to modernize it, and the calls for revoking and repealing the FOID Card Act entirely, just getting rid of the requirements. That's gone nowhere. There have been some at the Illinois State House that have pushed for that, but again, it's gone nowhere. So recently, there were some changes to the FOID Card Act, and it included a board that could field appeals for people being denied their FOID card privileges in the state of Illinois. And that was part of a pretty broad sweeping modernization act that passed the Illinois State House. The board was created by law January 1st, 2022. So at the beginning of this year. It's a 7-member board appointed by Governor J.B. Pritzker, and they are set to take appeals to FOID card revocations or denials in the new year. But the board, here we are, it's like 3 or 4 months or so. The board has not been seated. There's been nobody appointed to the FOID Appeals Board. And that's an issue for people who have had their FOID cards revoked, and they've had visits by law enforcement, and they've had to surrender their FOID card and any weapons they have or run afoul with the law. So those individuals, and as we have a recent report as recent as 9 days ago, the Illinois State Police said they've conducted more than 200 enforcement checks and have confiscated the FOID cards and saw that weapons were transferred for more than 1,000 individuals. Well, I asked Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday when he was in Springfield what kind of due process people have if their privileges are being taken away, if their Second Amendment rights are being taken away. And here is Governor J.B. Pritzker addressing my question, but also you're going to hear from John Bach, who is the executive director of the gun rights group Guns Save Life. And he told us earlier this week that there's no board in place to take these appeals. And that's a big problem for people who are looking for some kind of due process. So again, here's Governor J.B. Pritzker, followed by John Bach from Guns Save Life.
Governor, the FOID appeals board is still vacant. You've got the state police going out and revoking people's FOID cards. What due process do those individuals have if there's no board members appointed by you?
Well, be clear that we're making sure that we're removing weapons from people who've had their FOID cards voided. Remember, these are people who no longer qualify for a FOID card. So this is very hard work. This is something we've been at for the last 4 years to make sure that we're keeping people safe. Much more than ever before, this is now happening. The ISP, frankly, in dangerous circumstances sometimes, are having to go approach people to get their weapons because they no longer qualify to carry one.
Well, to their credit, the Illinois State Police have revamped their processing system for FOIDs and concealed carry, and they're now within the statutory guidelines of time of processing. As far as those who are revoked, the state police is revoking without any due process, with zero due process. They're revoking these FOID cards left and right. They're sending revocation letters out by the bushel basketful. And I'll give you an example of some of the people who are revoking. There was a Decatur police officer, a woman who was shot in the line of duty earlier this summer or in the spring. And her FOID card, while she was out on disability for the gunshot wound, her FOID card was revoked because she sought treatment for an eating disorder when she was in college. And she's trying to get her FOID card back, and she can't get it back because Governor Pritzker, under the FOID Modernization Act, has not nominated a single individual to this FOID appeals board that's supposed to handle these sorts of appeals. So there's no avenue for people to get their FOID cards restored or reinstated under the current system. Yeah, there's a provision there for a FOID appeals board, but Pritzker has not nominated a soul to fill those board seats, so nothing's happening on those. So those people are completely in limbo, and the courts are reluctant to handle this until people have exhausted their appeals process within the Illinois State Police. So Governor Pritzker and his friends in the legislature that are leading our state have done a fine job basically taking people's FOID cards away without any due process at all. Where in any other state of the union, they'd be perfectly legal to own and possess a gun. But here in Illinois, if you got treatment for an eating disorder when you're in college, you're liable to get your FOID card revoked.
Again, John Bach with Guns Save Life. Before that, Governor J.B. Pritzker. The governor's people cut off questions or pointed to other reporters, and I couldn't get a follow-up question as to why he hasn't appointed anybody to the FOID Appeals Board. Now, individuals could appeal directly to the Illinois State Police Director. You got to imagine that's likely going to just stack up with those appeals if they do that. Up until the end of this year and then the start of the new year, that's when the FOID Appeals Board can start fielding some of these, but there's nobody appointed to the FOID Appeals Board yet. It still remains vacant, 7-member board, and the governor has that appointment power. However, the governor did appoint somebody yesterday to lead the Illinois Arts Council. This was the organization that doles out grants to arts organizations from the state of Illinois. It was formerly chaired by former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan's wife, Shirley. But with all the scandal around the Madigans, Shirley stepped down, and Pritzker has now appointed Nora Daly to the Illinois Arts Council. It's a familiar name. All right.